Welcome to this week's episode of The Sacred Path. I am your guide, Rothi Midran Apkalu. Last week's episode, we discussed aspects of reality as we adapt to living off-grid and creating an ecosystem in environmental harmony. This week's episode, we will be going further in depth on the layout for our lands, the development, the work we have begun, how large each area is, and a virtual representation of the lands, which will go along with a video we will be working on within the next week or two to represent the progress of our plans and tell the story. The land itself is 40 acres, 5 acres of it being marked off that currently occupies the cabin where we reside in a 10 by 20 building with an elevated roof, allowing room for 2 lofts, one of which is used for a spare bed, and the other is used for pantry or storage. In the front of the cabin, as you face the highway, is the start of our 20 by 25 foot underground greenhouse, native name being Wallapini, that will be used for tropical crops along with growing of our food crops during the winter season. Overall depth, we need to dig it out to a total of 6 feet deep. Ideally, a minimum of 6 feet, perhaps even farther if possible. Right now we're digging it by hand, so that's quite an effort to undertake for that square footage. Off to the west of the cabin is an early development for a compost pit and a ash pit for spent fireplace ash, both usable for adding nutrients to the dry and arid soil, although we have found in digging that look to be fairly black and rich in nitrogen. For the most part, the entire land needs to be remediated and revitalized. We're waiting for word back from the USDA in regards to soil testing. We know it is highly alkaline in this area and will require amending. We have started collecting coffee grounds from the neighborhood cafe, which will help with adding to the acidity and nutrients that are vitally required. The land is cleared around the greenhouse now, as is the road, which is packed clay, and which is held up well considering. Although, again, we get nearly no moisture here, so it's not in as much stressful environment as many natural terrains are. It extends next to the home, the greenhouse, along the highway, floating off to exiting to the east, almost adjacent to U.S. Highway 122, 2 miles from the turnoff at the Alamosa Sand Dunes. The area behind the cabin is used for building materials now and is being cleaned up for parking. We've cleared an immense amount of brush in the approximately 2 to 2.5 acres space back there, extending back to the end of the land, markers landing off the total of the 5 acres of the 40. Next, we go back to the gardens and the outdoor kitchen. The first garden is named the Rookery, a name which is the significance because it is the term used for a home for dragons, as a tribute to the dragons who serve as guides and guardians of myself and these very lands. We will be adding various sage and pampas grass throughout the entire garden areas and the landscapes. There are a variety of natural plants throughout the world which have the name dragon in them and are attributed to the dragons. We have found over 20 of them so far and have ordered seeds from all over the world in order to begin the dragon garden. It's approximately 1,200 to 1,500 square feet for the dragon garden area. The sage and pampas grass will be serving 2 purposes. The pampas grass will form reeds like bamboo that will reach up to 6 feet in height with colored tufts at the top that will work as both windbreak as well as for developing taproots. And The reeds, when the season ends, can be dried and used for structural materials as well. The sage, of which we have several different colors and varieties already here to be ready to be planted, will also serve for taproots as well as medicinal and sacred plants. The reeds will eventually be used as a covering for the underground earthen kitchen, which will have a cloth below it as a windbreak and a water break. The dragon garden is approximately 40 by 80 feet, with 2 herb spirals being integrated at the entry, which also will be having herb spirals at the entry of each of the main gardens. The kitchen is an asymmetrical pentagon, having approximately 400 square feet, with an additional courtyard of 150 feet. Its formal title will be the Wizard's Lair, because, after all, what is cooking but true magic when it is done right? The walls will be lower, approximately 3.5 feet walls made of rammed earth, which will be then cured by firing in the center of the earthen kitchen before it is completed, so that the heat from the brush, which we have cleared, will be used for baking the soil that is surrounding the walls. Above this will be pillars, which will raise the roof to a 6-foot height, 6 to 6.5 foot height. To the side, facing Mount Blanca on the east, there will be a glass door which will serve as a windbreak. The other areas, ultimately, we will plan to screen in and add removable storm doors as well, so that it can be used all year round. The raised courtyard will seat 3 two-top people. The main kitchen will have another 3-top person, 3-top table, and the bar will seat another 4 for a total of 13 people, a number that's sacred to the dragons, representative of the lunar cycle and the creation of symbolic of our shadow self. The working area of the wizard lair will be a clay and earthen oven with a small wooden stove and a prep sink. The area surrounding the wizard's lair will be Gaia's Hearth, our primary food garden, in total over 3,500 square feet, with a pond for irrigation to the east and the west, the contours following the natural lay of the land. Crops will be a mixture of common and heirloom food crops, exotics, herbs, and flowers, as well as trees that are in the plans. However, we need your support and assistance in order to gather the trees, plants, resources, and soils that are required, in addition to this fertilizer and remediation materials that are required in order to allow them to properly grow. Directly adjacent is a small garden of about 1,000 square feet that will serve as the garden for teas and medicine, named the Mad Hatter's Tea Room. Plans include making a miniature tea room gazebo, perhaps even inverted, in true tribute to the Alice in Wonderland Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Behind the tea garden is an area of similar size that will serve as a basis for our night garden, featuring night blooming flowers, phosphorescent plants and mushrooms, crystals, and a gazebo for VIP functions. The night garden will be entitled Nightingale's Nursery. The main courtyard for dining surrounding it on both sides, with one having space for about 50 to 60 people, the other seating capacity for approximately 100 to 125. Total potential for seating dining areas 200 to 250 people in an outdoor setting overlooking the mountains. Now we enter the more spiritual realm as we get away from the food aspect with a spiritual sanctuary and Zen garden Abraxas Oasis totals 2,500 square feet of clay, with small islands spotting it that will serve as elemental tributes to each of the four primary elements: earth, air, fire, and water. In addition to an earthen meditation and initiation area that will be inspired by a sweat lodge, only the fire will be in the center of the dome, and it will be made of earthen clay, similar to the kitchen. Other ideas in the more area for this include stone crystal sculptures inspired by Stonehenge. For those not initiated, Abraxas is the dragon from Gnostic teachings that guards sacred wisdom. Zen meditation and sacred initiation are the sources of true wisdom, so it serves as the namesake for this area. This doesn't include the back half of the land, in total 15 to 20 acres, over 600 feet wide, that is reserved for animals in the future plans, such as chickens, ducks, goats for milk, and potentially even more, such as cattle. Additional areas of the land will be used for walkways, sculptural elements, including developing and working on kinetic sculptures that harness the ever-present winds and transforming them into energy, such as windmills, only in a beautiful and elegant organic manner, serving the purpose of creating energy as well as beautifying the lands. As much as possible, we are building with the materials of the lands and salvage. The interior of the cabin we have begun to finish with slatboards gathered from the pallets which have been disposed of and broken down, and the unusable items have been added to our firewood pile, so nothing is truly wasted. In addition, there will be a medicine garden as well that will be directly to the east of the cabin area, and a temple that will be there as well. The temple being built in a Fibonacci spiral pattern in sacred geometry on a landing of clay that will be over 600 square feet, meeting the requirements that are required by the county in order to have proper residency. Ultimately, we plan on having the area zoned and approved for camping, for retreats, possibly even a jazz or music festival with the musicians that I know from the wonderful city of New Orleans that I lived in for a decade. Your support is needed to help us in creating a new earth. There is much work that is needed, many plants and resources that are still required, and many, many items that are needed beyond that we have not even begun to explore. If you are able to help us